Okay, I hope it's not too self-indulgent to announce that I'm going to speak about a neologism that I somehow came to through thinking about, at first, living organisms and how they perceive their environment. Mostly, I work with biophonic creatures, and I think biophony and bioacoustics is, for anyone who's doing field recording, a very juicy and very kind of accessible way of recording things. But when I have started to think really about what it means to sense life and living differently, and I think Yuri has pointed really nicely to this absurd delineation between living and non-living, I came to very similar conclusions that reality and sensing is not really only something that biotic organisms do, though science only proves a certain kind of chronological sense for the creatures with eyes. It can be proven very effectively by flickering lights into a creature with eyes, at which frequency they perceive reality. For humans, it is 60 hertz. For a tiny bird, 145 hertz. But it's more tempting for me in this context of the projects that Sandra has a little bit explained to me and what you've already told me this morning. I find it more tempting to speak about temporal perception that is referring to reality not only in the entities that are living, but also in something that in bioacoustics and acoustic ecology we call geophony, so the sound of geophonic creatures. And this means the sound of the rock, of the earth, the sound of fire, the sound of wind and water. So I limited myself in showing you a few pieces that are more connected to this interest in not so much biotic, biophony, but the more geophony, and how to listen to it as though it is a counterpart with whom you are communicating sonically on the same level. And for me, that is very important ethically, because it shows that we cannot be negligent towards something that we perceive lesser, less living, less cognitive, less active, less whatever, and to make propositions in art for us to make a shift. And I can clearly see the difference between now and maybe 15 years ago, when we started to speak about these things, about non-delineation, non-binary things. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, a lot of people wouldn't understand us. And now I'm already almost feeling that I'm talking to a crowd that already knows everything that I've got to say. And for me, that is a very beautiful phenomenon, because it proves that we have already been successfully making this cultural turn into something that is not necessarily binary, not necessarily anthropocentric. And maybe I would point out, before going to to present individual artworks, that when I was thinking about chronoreality, a few other terms historically came to mind, like heterochrony, which is from biology, and it means all the stages in development of a certain creature with different variations in size. And this term has been used later on also in philosophy by Foucault to show how time is treated differently socially, how it's controlled, and it reformulate through Virillo into chronopolitics, which is the dictation of time. And I think we were talking about this today in the workshop when we were talking about the aggressive sound of an alarm clock waking up, that this is also a part of capitalist chrono-reality. So my main field or my main methodology is field recording, but I use different sensors and different field recording techniques to also apply them, otherwise not necessarily only in the field, so not only in like given environment outside, but also like in a lab or in a studio. So the first piece that I would like to share with you, and I think I came to the idea because quite a number of you are actually working with mines and sand and rock and stone and the materiality as such. And I thought of presenting the piece that was actually the last piece that I have finished together with my collaborator, Hugo Loriet. And the title of the piece is rather poetic, How Long Can a Branch Bow Before It Breaks? And we were contemplating a lot about resilience and how the need to live and persist in living despite all the odds is visible in the location that we were exploring. And the location that we were exploring is Hambacher Forest. Some of you might have heard about it, and this is a picture of how the forest was gradually killed from 1984, but the excavation started in 78, and how it was gradually eaten up by the machinery of energy production. And we decided at first, because we saw quite a lot of work that has been done by activists and by other artists as well, working in this field at the time when it was actively politically contested ground. And a lot of the people, or most of the people, were going for the shock therapy of really showing that kind of view of the horrid excavation. And this, what you're seeing now, it's very flat. It doesn't give the horror justice. But we purposefully wanted to focus on the forest itself and on how it actually persists and feels in it despite the inevitable destruction. The reason why the activists have moved out, the settlers who were defending the forest, is because some sort of agreement was reached, but the scar and the destruction has not been solved by that. Of course, we have learned that how most of these huge mines are to be restored through flooding, and this is some sort of solution that looks into a far, far future, and this has given us some form of hope despite the fact that it is a very destroyed ground. It is almost like all the animals. I got really used to meeting wild boars. Daily I would meet 5 to 20 wild boars quite close to me because the density of population was so high, because everyone from this huge forest were crammed into this little tiny space that was left, that is left now. You can see like right at the bottom, this is everything that remains of the forest, and you can literally walk through it in half an hour. And then we were thinking a lot about this fragility and how to really present it. And one of the ways that we were already consciously aware when going to the field, for which we prepared quite a bit, was the methodology of a kind of forensic marking of wherever we found a certain sound object or a photographic object or a video or any bits and pieces, and even two objects we marked on the map. And then when we exhibited the piece, was in the space of Malo Edition in Paris. They are running now a series called Même Si, in spite of, I think it means, and they are focused in architectural ecology and acoustic ecology and archives and social engagement. And they have helped us to create a sort of an archive online so you can actually see it and explore it. And all the sounds and all the visuals are there. But the way we decided to exhibit the piece was purely sonic. And the reason was that you would transpose yourself in a way of very attentive listening. And one of the reasons was because Ugo is doing a PhD in Sorbonne about the how sound in itself can be informative, and he questions it whether it can be. So we were really trying to understand if there is a close connection between what we have experienced in the field and if our culture is so visual that we cannot perceive the space without visual stimuli, or can we understand it purely through sonic input. So the corridor with 23 speakers was purely field recording, and then we made, this one was, it was much quieter, I promise. And there were like segments of places that you would travel through when you would walk through the corridor, so that you would be shifted in space and time with each step. You would get another kind of sonic image. That's why we called it the image corridor, like a sonic image. And then the second piece would be a electroacoustic composition using this same materials, but modulating them in order to give a more kind of, we would give a sort of an emotional or kind of experiential imprint of what we have lived through in the field, and hopefully that people will understand it. And the third piece, the simplest, but also the most painful, was the very subsonic thud that we have felt, not heard, always when we were near the mine, when the big excavations machines were going. And those machines in the open pit mines are the largest man-made machines on Earth, full stop. And the thud, the physical thud that you feel, it's unlike an earthquake. It resembles an earthquake, but it's more like a pressure. And we have tried with this subsonic, it goes below 60 hertz, so that's why it's not quite loud here, was present in the space, and every once in a while we would pause it with the reason of giving the contrast to people, that they would understand how it is to be with, to live with this, and how it is to be without. And I don't know if you have watched the film Zone of Interest, that is portraying a Nazi family living next to the concentration camp. And this kind of sound is precisely what they have constantly used. They never show what is being done, the crimes that are being committed, but it's this thud that is always there. And going through very idyllic villages of the surrounding area that are sometimes only 30 meters away from this pit, is precisely that kind of dissociation from the environment that you are in. We try to associate people with the sound on the one hand giving visibility to the more than human others who are still persisting there, and on the other hand showing this pressure that is constantly there, and you cannot pretend that the forest is just nice nature. And we were very happy to receive throughout the exhibition that was in November and December, because Hugo was doing his research and he was going through this socio-musicological questionnaire, and a lot of people understood what we tried to make, and they understood the environment. And when they got to the last part of the exhibition with the archive material, they said, aha, yeah, I felt it, I knew it, this was present in the sound. This project is going to have a continuation. I hope we have started to speak with one Polish researcher that we will go and record. She's also a field recorder that will go and record Bełchatów. Is that correct? Is anyone Polish? Bełchatów open pit mine, which infamously is now larger than Hambacher, which used to be the largest open pit mine. For me, I've never really worked with the location so intimately, but I always knew from like 2018 that I want to go to Hambacher, and now I know precisely why, because it gives me, it's extremely uncomfortable field work. It's not like recording birds in March to a beautiful forest, but it bears meaning of a witness and also a portrait of the world that is not set right, but without morals, just like this is how it is. It's like solastalgia, if you know the neologism, which means missing a space that was destroyed by climate change, missing something that is never coming back because we destroyed it. And Bełchatów is one of those places that I intend to explore next. Now I would like to roll back time and go to a piece that we made, now it must be 10 or even more years ago since we started, together with collaborator Robertina Siebianic and Aleš Hing-Zergon. We came across, I think I've told you, those who were at the workshop today, we stumbled across a scientific paper published in May 2015 that proposed one of the possible theories of where the origin of life came from. And what they were going for was not so much electricity, but the first enzymes, how the first enzymes were created. And one of the propositions is that they were created in deep sea thermal vents, which are creating so-called chemobryonic conditions where metal salts would formulate in very base solutions. Like to do it in the lab, we use sodium silicate, but otherwise it's a very base watery solution, and then this salt is, through osmotic forces, looking for a balance in the pH, and that's how it's growing. We have 2 samples. We've made 2 samples earlier this morning in next door. But they mathematically and also in the lab, I think they're still trying and have come through some breakthroughs to prove that the first enzymes did in fact appear. I think there were some breakthroughs about 3 years ago in this field. So mostly how we saw people treating chemoembryonics and chemical gardens is that people would seed it, people would take a camera, put time-lapse function on, and then present to other people a very fast version. Here's a chemical garden. And at the time we were exploring a lot about what it means, deep time, how long this is, how fragile humanity is, how fragile even biotic species are, how quickly an extinction can occur, how we are in the process of extinction, and if this truly was the origin of life, how long must it have taken? Maybe it was just one electrical current and the whole revolution happened, or maybe it was long eons of time before it happened. But we were negotiating this, how to understand and how does this inform us in the way how we live today in the society. And we decided, of course, we are also going to monitor and we are going to collect data from these chemical gardens, but we found it too loud from the sub. We found it very counterproductive to just show you via a time-lapse how it occurs, because we wanted to bring people down to another time scale. So to be attentive to something that you're not seeing quite happen. You can sometimes in the beginning when you plant the chemical garden, you can almost see it growing, but not quite. You turn away and then it's all of a sudden it's different. But then with time, the pH levels up, so they start growing much slower. And that's why we did not give time lapse to the people, but to the audience, but we rather invited them to try and listen, because we used 4 cameras for quadraphonic system, and each of the speakers would have a generative evolving sound that would be dependent on the light detected by the camera, light changes detected by the camera. And the composition would auditorially change. We had like once in Graz, the gallerist was recording, I think, 3 days for a radio show, and then we clicked through it, and of course, yes, the composition was very, very different, but you couldn't perceive it with your bare ear, but the reason was to slow down, to really contemplate what it means to be in another time scale. And then maybe going just a little bit, most of you already know it because we were talking about this today. One of the pieces that we did with the same group together was exploring the piezoelectrical charge in piezo crystals. In this case, we were DIY growing Rocher salt crystals, and we were taking small changes under the pressure. These crystals make small changes in electricity, and we were taking this data and also changing the composition in a very similar way, I think, with the similar process that we used already in the previous piece. Next, I would like to also speak about also one collaborative work. Mostly you'll see that I do collaborative works. I think that it's, apart from the compositions that I like to do the solo, most of the installations I think I do in somehow through conversation with others. And the installation Chronolith, and it's also a quadraphonic composition that we play live mostly, is done by our group. We are a group for bioacoustics and sonic ecology. Apart from me, there's Orpo Esis, Petra Kapš, Boštjan Perovšek, Bojana Šalić-Podešva, and Brane Zorman. Very sorry. And this piece was created through trying to ask a very absurd question: how does the rock sound? And the more we asked this question, the more we came to understand that there is plenty of ways that something that we say, like silent as a rock or silent as a fish, anything that we say like is self-evident, I think it should be questioned, because we can prove that it's, first we can prove that it's not true, and the way how we prove it can prove to be very poetic. So in Chronolith, we took, okay, the sound is not too surprising, huh? Okay, cool. We were thinking again of geological time, of how to perceive, how to understand not only the immediate material that we can record, the recording of earthquake, or a recording of sand sipping, or of stones falling, or something that would be quite immediate. Although we understood that there is a part of stone that is of stones and rocks that is very immediate, like an earthquake, that it breaks. But we were also thinking of how to understand these notions of like lithosphere changing. And then we invited a scientist. He's a micropaleontologist. So he is exploring the microorganisms in ancient Earth times. And he was talking about a lot of notions, but the thing that struck me the most is what I already shared with you, that Coccolithophore, some of the most tiny sea organisms, the planktons that have hard shells made of limestones that they create themselves, created a lot of limestones that we now see in the Alps. So for me, this absurd difference between a microorganism creating limestone and this huge mountains of rock was such an absurd kind of tension. And through observing what actually rock is and learning about Coccolithophore, we learned that we are made of rocks as well. And we started to feel, how do the rocks in me sound like? How do the rocks in me feel like? And then we were thinking a lot about metaphorical ideas and about how we see rocks personified. A rock as a girl. In Slovenia and in the Alps, we have one rock that we say it's the pagan girl, Ajdovska deklica, a pagan girl. So we were thinking about this kind of ideas and how we give natural phenomenon human-like emotions and characteristics, and they like saying the fire burned with fury, or the light danced on the surface of water. But then we started to think of another notion, how feeling ourselves as rock, how it would be that we wouldn't personify a rock, but that we would geophicate, if that's a word. We made up a word, geophicate ourselves so that we become a rock and we feel like a rock. Maybe this was like, this is 3 sets of the installation, and each of the people in the band created the composition for one of the plates that we had. We wanted to work mostly with the natural materials, But what I showed you today in the morning as well, what we used is transducers, so that we would use the stone plates as the membranes of the speakers, and this is how the loop between us taking the sound and inspiration from rock and giving the sound back to rock and taking the sound back to us was created. And the whole composition was made from 6 scenes. We were thinking about fragmentation and granulation, which is basically what you're doing now with sand, I think. All these materials, very, very fragile materials. Then we were thinking about drifting rock and empty universe, where the only things that you materially find are stars and rock-like planets. Then sliding plates through eons, so changing, shifting the surface and inner core of the Earth. Resonating of the material, how this material feels. Does it have a vibration? Does it breathe? They showed that the Earth actually is breathing with telluric electromagnetic radiation. And then we were thinking about calcification, petrification, and sedimentation of another process of more connected to the gravity forces. And at the end, we wanted to make a loop and create iterative processes of the materials that we used that far. And by all the sounds, we constantly have tried to empty the sound out because we wanted to be as still as a rock. And all the time, when playing, our meditation was, when you have a sparse sound, ask yourself if you can make it even sparser. I think I have reached about 30 minutes. Maybe for the end, I would like to just briefly mention that why I find field recording a kind of an informative process that actually feeds into whatever we or I, or in collaboration, or I personally are doing. I think that there is a certain kind of ecognosis that Morton is calling in the practice of field recording. I think it raises attention, and I think I heard one Brandon LaBelle once say in one of his lecture, attention is the inner form of generosity, and meaning that as soon as we give attention, we give also the potential to sense the connectivity with whatever we give attention to. And this also feeds into the capability of empathy for the environment that would, and empathy, I do not think it's some kind of comforting and joyful experience. I think, as I've shown at the beginning of the case of an open pit mind, it is a very disturbing, very dystopian, very harsh reality that is not to be beautified. I think in field recording, exposed to the elements, you'll find a lot of vulnerability and discomfort. And I think I mentioned today already that comfort is something for which we are ready to sacrifice our earth, our life, anything. I think Morton says humans would do anything, something in the line of humans would do anything to know where their next meal comes from. So comfort. I like more and more to work location-based and specific, because I think that then you can really grow into a relational, a kind of relational feeling with the other. And then more in the composition, I like to work not so much with realistic, but with the potential. And what really interests me aesthetically the most is observing randomness and repetition. And I use the occurring sound of the field recording as the basis of my composition. Thank you.